And the story is about a salt doll. A doll that is made of salt. And the story goes like this. One day, the doll goes for a dip in the ocean. That's it. No doll and no ocean. It's interesting when we talk about awareness, because we're never out of awareness. It's not something we have to arrive at, or something we have to get, or something we have to attain, or something we have to learn how to do. You can't not be aware, you know. And this thing that seems so precious and so difficult to find is simply the thisness. It's just this thisness consciousness. And usually the habit is to put the attention in the thinking stream, which is constantly the subtext that's interpreting, making story. Oh, this is what's going on, this is happening, or whatever it might be. That's just the subtext. And it's all part of that awareness as well, kicking up and appearing, manifesting as a narrative. And you know, this awareness that you are, this awareness that is arising, that's all there is. And everything else is just story that's put over the top. So when they say there's nothing to get, you know, it's the actuality. It's just this thisness. It's the great secret. You know, and because there is that habit that we developed of trying so very, very hard to understand it, to make sense of it, to get to it, all of the focus is going in that trying. It's like, forget the trying. Is it?
It's like working so hard to be in the present moment.
Yes, yes.
Without realising where you can't be anywhere else.
Exactly.
Yes.
Try not being in the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
Try being in the future. Try being in the past.
Yes. I suspect that mindlessness is perhaps more useful than mindfulness.
If we give up believing the story, are we left with awareness?
Believing the story. What do you mean by believing the story?
Believing, oh, my body is the world, and there's all things happening, and lots of people.
What do you believe? What's the
well,
actuality?
it looks realistic, but I don't really believe it fully. No.
Yeah, but see, nobody's saying you're not real. You know, in the beautiful line from the Hinsing Ming, it says to deny the reality of things is to miss their reality. To assert the emptiness of things is to miss that reality. So nobody's saying you're not real. Nobody's saying the manifestation isn't real. What's being said is it's not as it's construed. This is a perfect manifestation, perfect expression of that awareness, expressing in a seeming myriad of forms, each unique, beautiful expressions of that singularity, the awareness. So to say, oh look, no, that's not real, that carp's not real, it's just an illusion. An illusion again is an object, you know, and that's a really interesting thing. When people say, oh, it's all illusory, again, it's pointing to an object. It's being objectified in mind as an illusion. And it's very subtle, and the mind gets tricked on this stuff. Because again, it's in denying, you know, something is or something isn't, is exactly the same thing. They're two ends of a no stick.
It's when I studied theology, it was fascinating because the early followers of Jesus it was experiential.
Mm.
They actually they were making up words because of the experiences were beyond any category. Glossolalia is a word that we have that has come through from those times. No one knows what it means, but it's like, God, this is beyond anything. Oh, well, God, I don't know. Yeah. So the language is initially experiential, then it becomes creedal. It gets formed into creeds and rules. And that you see that in every organisation. In every group, and it doesn't matter. That's just the way it unfolds. The important thing is in our own is to actually go back to the experience ourselves. Yeah. So your comment, Peter. The question is, what's your experience? Because it doesn't matter what anyone says. Just stay with your own experience. So what do you see? What do you experience when you look through and you take on all those, you've heard all those slogans and you start to do your own work? What do you see now?
Well, I'm still just living my life, but it's a lot calmer.
Yeah.
And I've noticed lately there's this really subtle feeling everything's right, which I hardly even notice, but it's really subtle, but it's there.
Yeah. And you say that there's still an I, but don't worry about it. There's a knowing that you've done enough investigation to know that you can't locate it. So it appears, it disappears.
And having a notion that the reference point will completely dissolve is yet another fantasy. This is more of that subtle kind of thing. You realise, blah blah blah, the non-dual experience, and the non-dual experience is still an experience. It's still an experience. So to have a non-dual experience, non-dual state as it's often called, is not kind of a diploma of enlightenment. It's yet another experience. A reference point arising is just another experience. To measure one against the other, again, is creating that division. So, as Peter often says, you can't even get out the door without a reference point. But the interesting thing is, noticing that the reference point that arises, this me notion that arises, it's kind of really wobbly. It's going to be very different at different points in the day if we go and look. And that gives you a real hint. It's not solid, it's not real, it's malleable. It has its function. And
arises
it's not,
when it needs to.
exactly. And it's not who you are. You're prior to that. So see it for what it is, and without owning that, taking ownership, without imagining that's what you are. It's just another thought, another seeming thing that comes and goes. And what you are is prior to any coming and going of anything, any concept.
So there will always be a certain sense of self. You can't, because of a certain reference point, because we are localized. Is that right? There's always got to be some sense of...
No, completely. There can be absolutely no sense of anything, even body. So there's no
But
prescription.
how would you function if you were like that all the time? If that was
Well, you
your...
can't function. That's why it doesn't happen all the time.
Well, that's
You'd be
what I'm
dead,
saying.
because you can't eat.
Yeah. So there has to be...
It's part of the functioning. Just like a reference point arises, so you can get out the door. A sense of hunger arises, a sense of location, body, eating, what have you, arises. All these things are just part of the natural functioning. And in a very real sense has nothing to do with any notion of a me. because the breathing's happening spontaneously. All the body functions are happening spontaneously. We can know theoretically how they might work, but we can't even know a coming thought, or we can't even remember a thought from a few minutes ago. So this imagined thing that we think's running the show is just another fantasy. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with having a sense of, you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, make a sandwich, you have to do this, you're driving a car, whatever. It's all part of the natural functioning, but it's not what you are. That is all appearing in that.
And everyone has very ordinary experiences of having no self-awareness. Like Kalyani mentioned driving a car. We've all experienced driving a car and changing gears and indicating and putting the lights on and turning it here and there and arriving somewhere and having no memory of having done it. Everyone's had that experience, that the functioning simply happened. And that the story of an old woman sewing and doing quite intricate sewing. Her friend arrives and sits down and starts chatting to her. She continues to sew and holds the conversation. And no dilemma, the sewing, the exquisite work is happening, the conversation is happening. Yet if she consciously decides, she won't really hear the conversation. Or if she gets caught up in the conversation, she may slip a stitch or, So just in that simple example, you can see where it all just functions. Or there are times when there's a particular focus which actually disturbs other noticing. Could you hear the dog just then? Yeah, you didn't have to think, is it, and there was a knowing. The intelligence that you are just naturally registered that. And knowing that was a dog, it wasn't a horse.
Because that's something I've learned prior to now.
Yeah. And this extraordinary wakefulness, right from birth, is copying and learning from everyone. And we learn all sorts of bad habits as well as good habits. We internalise our parents as primary characters, and it's just stored to disk, and it's thrown up spontaneously.
So that sense of self that sort of comes and goes, but it won't ever fully go until the body dies. Is that right?
Well, who knows what happens when the body dies? Let's just stay here.
Yeah.
Yet there's you could have experience. You can have awareness of no awareness.
Awareness of no awareness.
It's a curly one. Yeah. And there's a lot of stories about enlightenment, altered states, and every one of us here has collected a whole lot of information from other experts and stories and other people's opinions. And the recommendation is just to hold it lightly, not worry about it. And I see so many people, this can't be it. I'm not seeing the blue pearl. This isn't it because this doesn't fit my assumptions and categories. And it's like, by analogy, disappointment is something you can't do spontaneously. To disappointment, you have to not be here. You have to be running a story about an anticipation. And when the moment arises, you can't be here because you've got to check to see whether it's as good as what you thought it was going to be. And only in the next moment, afterwards, can you actually have your disappointment as you recall that it wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be. That's all just a mental overlay of life that's just unfolding. And that's simply habit. So seeing that habit, just let it go. And the enlightenment story, the awakening story is so like that. People project how it should be or could be or will be and miss the wonder that's simply here. So you could simply say, this is it, this is enlightenment, appearing as this, including the thought, I don't get it, or what a lot of rubbish. Because it's all encompassing. And the hint is just simply to keep widening and embracing everything. There's a beautiful old Tibetan saying, let your view be as wide as the horizon and your thoughts as fine as flower. Not either or, holding them both. This wide openness and this discriminating intelligence.
And with regard to spiritual experiences, in a very real sense, it's a byproduct of that shift of holding that identity solidly. It's a bit like a computer screen. It's a bit like the old-fashioned tellies, the valve tellies. That's a great example because most people have never had an experience of seeing them. And you'd fiddle with one of the knobs and you fiddle with another and the picture would start jumping through the tube. It's fabulous old technology. Or other things would start to happen. And so when we start mucking around with this pretty solid notion of me and this is reality and this is how it is, and you start tweaking around with this and things start loosening up, there can be all sorts of things that take place. And most people might have read about that in books or experience that themselves. And some of the experiences can be extraordinary and sublime and astounding. And yet they have no merit or significance in themselves because they are yet another experience. And unless we're putting a template over the top of the experience of eating lunch or tying a shoelace up is less sublime and is lower than something that we might describe as a spiritual experience, unless we start making comparison and we start making levels, then having the most sublime dissolution experience and getting up and having a shower and making a bed, where's the distinction? Where's the difference?
Yeah.